The July heat fell like a weight over the Yellowstone Forest Reserve. It was one of those days when the air felt solid, too thick to breathe, and even the birds gave up on singing. The creek that cut through the northern valley, the one that on old maps had a name of running water and promise of coolness, was dry. Only white, smooth stones remained, polished by decades of current that were now just memory. And over those stones, leaving irregular tracks in the fine dust, walked a brown bear. She was in no hurry. She had no destination, just that heavy walk of someone carrying grief too recent to name. 3 weeks earlier, her litter had vanished in a night of storms and mudslides. The den where she'd left them protected had collapsed. She dug for 2 full days, her claws bleeding against the rocks, until the silence beneath the earth became unbearable. After that, she just walked. Her body still carried the milk that no one nursed anymore. Her instincts still woke her at dawn, searching for sounds that would never come again. On that scorching afternoon, she followed the dry creek bed because it was the path that required the least effort. Her muscles were tired with a tiredness that wasn't physical. It was the exhaustion of someone who'd lost their purpose. And it was there, at a bend where the stones formed a small depression, that she saw the box. It was cardboard. Brown, ordinary, the kind humans use for moving or disposal. Someone had left it there, perhaps hours before, perhaps at dawn. The lid was slightly open, and from inside came a smell that made the bear stop as if she'd hit an invisible wall. The smell of milk, the smell of newborn, the smell of helplessness. She approached slowly, her snout investigating the air in layers. There was no recent human smell, no immediate danger, only that silent appeal that emanated from the box like a muted scream. With one paw, delicate despite its size, she pushed the lid open. Inside, 3 golden retriever puppies lay motionless. They weren't dead, but almost. Dehydration had turned their tongues into small dried strips. Their eyes, still closed due to extreme youth, were sunken in their sockets. Their breathing was so shallow it barely moved their tiny chests. The bear could have moved on. She could have seen in them only small, easy meat. Nature wouldn't judge. But something happened in that moment, something that scientists would spend years trying to explain and never truly could. Her body, still swollen with milk ungiven, recognized that helplessness. The claws that had dug through collapsed earth for lost cubs recognized the size of those bodies. And the heart, that mysterious organ that beats the same in all mothers, decided for her. She lowered her massive snout and, with a delicacy that contradicted every pound of her body, picked up the first puppy by the loose skin of its neck. The mouth that could crush a moose skull held the creature like one holds porcelain. She turned and began walking in the opposite direction, away from the sun, toward the slopes where she knew there was a cave of cool stone. 12 miles away, in the North Sector Observation Tower, Forest Ranger John Chen was looking at the tablet screen connected to the monitoring drone when his heart nearly stopped. He blinked, zoomed in closer, called his colleague Sarah, who came running. "Is this what I think it is?" she whispered. "I don't know what you're thinking," John replied, his voice tight. "But if you're thinking that a brown bear is carrying a puppy like it's her own cub, then yes, that's what I'm thinking." They watched, silent, as the bear returned twice more to the box. 3 puppies, 3 trips, each one with that impossible care, that walking contradiction. In the rescue protocol, there were clear rules. Interfere as little as possible. Let nature take its course. But what was the natural course of this? This wasn't in any manual. John grabbed the radio, called the sector coordinator. 20 minutes later, 6 people were watching the live feed. The bear had taken all 3 puppies to a shallow cave, protected from the sun. And then, with movements that made them forget to breathe, she began to lick them, not to eat them, to cool them down. The large, wet saliva ran over the overheated little bodies, lowering their temperature, rehydrating the dried skin. It was maternal technique. It was what she would have done with her own cubs if they were still alive. "We can't take those puppies from her," the coordinator finally said. "Not now. She'll kill them if we try, and they'll die if we don't do something." "So what do we do?" Sarah asked. "We watch, and we pray that her instinct is stronger than biology." For 3 days and 3 nights, the team maintained vigil by drone. The bear didn't leave the cave. She would lie on her side, and the puppies, those small golden beings, would seek her belly. And there, in a scene that should have been impossible, they nursed. Bear milk in puppy stomachs. Biology said it shouldn't work, but it did. On the 3rd day, one of the puppies opened its eyes for the first time. On the 5th day, all 3 were wobbling across the cave rocks, following the bear as they would their own mother. The news leaked, as such news always does. First it was a naturalist blog, then a local paper. Within 2 weeks, the story of the bear who adopted puppies was international headlines. Millions of people watched the drone footage, seeing those little golden bodies sleeping against the massive brown fur. The images were impossible. They were sacred. But the effect went far beyond likes and shares. At the University of Montana, Dr. Elena Orozco, who had studied maternal behavior in mammals for 30 years, had to rewrite 2 chapters of her book. "We thought maternal instinct was species-specific," she explained in an interview that went viral. "We thought there was a chemical barrier, a DNA recognition that prevented this. But this bear..." She showed us that the pain of maternal loss can be greater than genetic programming, that the emptiness of nursing can be so desperate that the body accepts any offspring that needs it. In Phoenix, Arizona, a 52-year-old woman named Patricia watched the report on a sleepless night. She had lost her daughter in an accident 2 years before. Since then, she'd avoided contact with children, with anything that reminded her of what had been torn from her. But something about that bear, that unlikely mother embracing children who weren't hers, touched a place she thought was dead. The next morning, she signed up as a volunteer at a children's shelter in Tempe. 6 months later, she adopted a 7-year-old girl no one wanted because she was too old. The girl's name was Maya. "If a bear can love across difference," Patricia told the social worker, "so can I." In Portland, Oregon, a 9-year-old boy named Daniel, who suffered bullying for being adopted, brought the printed news to school. "See?" he told the classmates who laughed at him. "Even bears know that family isn't about blood. It's about who cares. And my mum chose me." The teacher cried. She used the story in science classes for 5 years straight. Conservation protocols changed. Unlikely encounters between species, which would have been interrupted immediately before, were now observed first. 3 similar cases were documented in the following years. A sea lion nursing a seal pup in California, a dog adopting raccoon babies in Florida, a cat caring for orphaned squirrels in Maine. All received the unofficial name Yellowstone phenomenon. Science began to understand that perhaps maternal instinct was older and deeper than speciation itself. That it was, in fact, the oldest instinct of all mammals, to protect what is fragile. 4 months after the rescue, when the puppies were already too big and the bear naturally began distancing them, preparing them for independence as she would with any litter, the conservation team collected them. They were adopted together by a family living on the edge of the reserve in Gardiner, Montana. All 3 lived to old age, always together, always inseparable. And every summer, when the family took them on forest trails, they would stop at a specific cave and refuse to leave for hours, as if they remembered, as if they paid homage. The bear lived another 8 years. She was seen several times by researchers, always alone, always walking the same paths. She never had cubs of her own again. But on monitoring cameras, scientists sometimes saw her stopped in specific places, her snout raised as if smelling something that was no longer there, as if searching for smells of milk and golden fur that no longer existed. As if, even after everything, she still missed that summer when her grief transformed into love for creatures that nature said were impossible to love. When she died, peacefully, on an autumn afternoon, there were 17 scientific papers citing her case. There were countless people whose lives changed because they watched a bear do what logic said was impossible. There were thousands of adoptions that happened because someone, somewhere, remembered that a mother of another species chose to love across difference. All of this because, on a scorching July afternoon, a cardboard box was left in a dry creek bed. Because a bear, heavy with grief and milk ungiven, chose to lower her snout instead of moving on. Because a small gesture, born from pain and emptiness, decided to become a bridge between worlds. And because sometimes it's precisely in the moments when logic gives up that love finds its truest path. Nature doesn't work with impossibilities, it works with necessities. And that summer, the necessity of two different species of orphans found each other and decided, against all rules, that survival sometimes looks less like struggle and more like embrace.